candor.
I got
And
some
we're also
shares
pretty
too.
informal here. Some of us are free, so we anticipate some interruption potentially. And also, if you would prefer that we, should I put on, actually, I should be on mic.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we should go mic or
We
mic
should go
less.
mic, probably because
With
they're
mic,
recording,
okay.
I think.
Okay, sounds good.
Happy also to stand if that's better, but I think we'll sit for now until people complain.
Well, I just want to say it's such an honor to share the stage with you. And for those of you who don't know me, this is the nervous version of Dr. Mokalla. If I was speaking with a fellow physician, I'd be at ease. But I've actually been not only looking forward to this, but feeling rather nervous interviewing someone of your caliber and expertise. So I've taken my notes, and you know, if I could maybe just start with a general framework. What led you to consider this topic and write this work?
Great, thank you, and thank you so much for doing this. You
My
don't
pleasure.
have to be nervous, you know, I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, so the book is like fundamentally about the power of seeing the other and being seen. That's at the heart of the book. What is that? And about in 2015 is when I actually started doing this research. And at the time, I was kind of interested in this work that work of being seen, and of seeing the other and being seen, that I found was underneath all this kind of humane interpersonal service work that happens all over the economy. So I'm talking about teaching, I'm talking about therapy, nurses, you know, all kinds of work, high-end sales, management, law, many different professions. And so I was really interested in the fact that this kind of special connective labor was happening underneath all these different kinds of occupations. At the same time, I was kind of taken by the notion that right now, if you get a good teacher, it's because you are either lucky or you are affluent. And that kind of the problem of how to kind of scale up this work, how to make this more systematized so we can spread it around, so it can be more equitable. That was, as a sociologist, something I care a lot about. So I started, that was kind of the underlying thing, underlying kind of question that was motivating my research. And I talked to people who were doing this work, and then I was talking to people who were systematizing it, or, you know, the program administrators, or the principals, or the trainers, you know, all the people who are kind of stepping back and going like, what is this? What's this work? How do people do it? Why is it valuable? And then it was 2015, which actually was the moment, pretty much, of burgeoning what they call socio-emotional AI, where some people in Silicon Valley were also wondering, how do we scale up good teaching? How do we disrupt how we currently deliver therapy or, you know, nursing care? And so their answer to that was to essentially automate it. And so at the beginning of this project, I was pretty open to that. And I investigated. I included a lot of engineers, talked to a lot of engineers, observed their work, and this book is the result of that.
Thank you. That lays the foundation beautifully for my next inquiry. And you know, let me share a story with you. So, among the things that I truly take joy in is doing advocacy work, both locally and internationally. I recently just got back from Belize, and one of the days when I was there serving in a village, an elderly couple came to see me. They had walked for an hour and a half to come and see me and my friends, handing out some antibiotics, some vitamins, and rendering primary care in rural parts of Belize where there is no care, little to no care. In medicine, it's very common for me to ask, what brings you in today? How can I help you? And this gentleman said, you know, I have three concerns. I have really bad muscle pain from intense labor. I would like some vitamins. And I'm blind. I gave him vitamins. I treated his pain with some anti-inflammatory agents, and I felt almost sheepish to acknowledge the fact that I could not care for his blindness due to glaucoma. And as if the joke was on me, he smiled and said, I didn't expect you to fix it. I just wanted you to hear what my concern was. I just wanted to be seen. It took a blind man for me to be able to see and make that connection. So my question for you is this connective labor uniquely human? In your research, having investigated all aspects, do we attribute it to something that only humans can do?
I love this question. So part of my goal with these talks, with this book in general, and I just realized this like yesterday, actually, is to make regular people, to embolden regular people to be able to have an opinion about AI. Because I'm sensing that people are worried about it, interested, varying degrees. You know, maybe some of you have already tried ChatGPT, you know, that kind of thing. Like, I feel like I sense there's some interest. There's certainly an enormous amount of hype happening. And what I'm sensing in people that I'm meeting is an uncertainty that is a little bit silencing them. A little bit, people are tentative in having an opinion, in my opinion, about AI. And so I'm hoping that my goal, partly, is for you to leave today with the sense that you're allowed to have an opinion about this, and to maybe give you some tools to use in your future conversations about it or your future reading about it. So that's the preface to the answer to this question, which is, you know, can only humans see the other? Okay, the answer is no and yes. So we'll start with the no. Because if this was Silicon Valley, I'd have to really go lay into the, you know, yes, machines can do this. Like, they're very sensitive to, or they are quick to the Luddite accusation. So, not a Luddite, believe in antibiotics, believe in science, believe in, you know, machines, I have a phone, whatever. So machines can see humans to some degree. And humans, this is the sad truth that was so beautifully documented by Sherry Turkle, if any of you have read her work, that humans project onto machines much more ability than machines actually have. So if programmers can have, you know, this has been something that has struck, and, you know, engineers marvel at this, at the kind of human capacity to be won over by the most modest human-like characteristics of not so sentient machines. So you'll have the engineers will code like a machine to be like, to ask, you know, and how do you feel about that? Or something like very low key, and humans will be like, wow, you know, like they'll really feel seen. And this is true this is a robust finding, as they say. So this has been repeatedly found. Humans, as Sherry Turkle said, are ready for the romance. They are leaping into this. Okay, that's the yes. You know, like, what is being seen? Or what is the seeing and being seen? Is it just invoking that feeling in the individual who's being seen? Is that good enough? Is that all what we're asking for? Does an individual feel seen? Because if that is all we're asking for, machines can do it. Okay. Here comes I forget why is this the yes part? Anyway, maybe that's the no part. I'm a little confused about which one is yes. No, but anyway, machines, yes, they can see the other. However, here's the kind of animating force behind this work that I wrote, which is they can't really have that very powerful exchange between human beings. And this work is so much more than just the individual and whether or not they feel seen. It is actually about the greater than the sum of the individual parts, the kind of magic, the resonance that happens between two people. And we don't actually have a lot, like, there's not, we don't know that much about what happens between people, but we are starting to know, and I want to say it's not just me, it's not just some fuzzy social scientist who has already cares so much about what's the social, but even, exactly, even neurologists, a hard science, we'll say, even neurologists are actually focusing on this. So they call this second person neuroscience, and they're very interested in the magic, they would not call it that, between what happens between people and trying to figure out how to measure that beyond just, does an individual learn algebra because they're seen? Do they better monitor their diabetes because they feel seen by their practitioner? You know, like, those are individual outcomes, and to some degree, machines can do that. They can't completely, but I would say, you know, I'll say engineers told me, well, that's just a matter of time. Like, they're gonna, you know, that, you know, many engineers who work in this field do not think there's anything special about humans. And what I would say is, if we retain our insistence or our predilection or our kind of emphasis that we put on individuals and the individual recipient, and that's what matters, then we are looking at a mechanized future of the mechanization of being seen. But if we are open ourselves to caring about what happens between two people, the impact on the worker as well as the client, that's actually a uniquely human experience that you cannot mechanize, obviously. And actually, I'll just say parenthetically one last thing, which is whatever connected labor does, it does in two directions. And it's one of my favorite findings, actually, because everyone, we already care, or we already know about, like, you know, oh, students, you know, when they feel seen, they are more dedicated and they learn more, and, you know, we know all that. And teachers would tell me that, but they would also say how it affected them. So, you know, the nurses would say, I did this, and it, you know, gave dignity. I did this and I watched it give dignity to the other. And then they would tell the story about how doing that helped them to find their own humanity. And so every time I found something that they gave someone else, it had an impact on them as well. I could go on, but I'll stop.
Thank you. In fact, let's take that theme and dissect it a little bit more. One of the chapters early on does this beautiful job of talking about automation and AI, and how, broadly speaking, we are in three different groups. One group that says, you know what, better than nothing. It's better than not having the app on your phone that monitors your blood sugar or your blood pressure, or mental health services, which we'll get into. I really would love to talk about that more. The second one is, it's better than humans. You know, this machine doesn't care about your insurance, it doesn't care about your gender, your age, your sexual orientation, and it also is not tired at 2 in the morning looking at this mole and deciding, is it cancer or not cancer? And then there's the third part, and I would like to belong to this optimistic group. Better together. Because I will tell you that in my work, thinking about the patients I help take care of, I am incredibly dependent on some triggers that come up on the electronic medical record that says, hey, Dr. Mokalla, you're about to order a CT on this kid who's got chronic kidney disease. Maybe you should check the creatinine before you give him a potentially toxic medicine to their kidneys. That's wonderful. It's great to have that pause. Or it's great to say, hey, you know what, this teenager was seen in our high-risk clinic. Can you make sure or think about putting some time aside to ask some critical questions about, you know, their health? I wondered if you could teach us a little bit more about those three broad categories of it's better than nothing, and some examples. It's better than humans, for sure. My God, what are you thinking? And then, you know what, there's an opportunity to be better together. And I can think of many anecdotes, but I'd love to hear what you learned in your interviews.
So great. We can talk for hours. Okay, the better than nothing is obvious, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. That is actually, I think these are actually, the way I present them in the book is that it is how AI is sold to us. And that was another thing I always hope to do with the book and with these book events, is inoculate you against these campaigns. And so now you're going to go forth and you're going to be like, oh, that's a better than nothing argument. And you're going to hear it. And that's the goal. Okay, so better than nothing. It's out there all the time. You know, like, oh, these poor people, they're not getting good college counseling, so we're going to give them an app. And that's going to solve that deprivation. Not completely, but, sorry. Okay, so then the next one is better than humans. And that's actually a tricky one because it's about judgment and shame. And there is judgment and shame in these encounters. It's a moment of great vulnerability when you are saying, you know, I want to be seen by you. And people always remember the wounds of when they were misrecognized or when they weren't seen. It's something that we all carry around, even if we've been seen all our lives. We have that one time or whatever, you know, like it's just that is a common human experience. And so it's hard for me to say, you know, that's not, you know, AI may be better because it doesn't have, it's not judging you, so, but you don't get to have that because it's a machine. So here I'm just going to say one thing, which is AI does judge you. And we know that, actually. It's a fallacy that it doesn't. I don't even have to tell you that too much about this, but, you know, the inherent biases that are collected out there from which the machine learns is embedded in the machine that sees you. So anyway, then the better than human, the better together thing, it is often I would say the party line in Silicon Valley, because they're trying different things to make you kind of on board. And the better together, for example, is behind what all will have heard, or I think it's very common, that AI will free us up. AI is going to free us up for more meaningful work. Raise your hand if you have heard something like that. Very common. That is how it is sold. Okay. I don't know whether I don't know what kind of capitalism you're living in, but I'll just say my view is that that's actually not realistic. That at least in the United States, what we often do is when we can save labor costs, we don't then hope that we can imbue the people that are still around with more meaningful labor. No, instead we cut them. So that's, I think, I hope that when you hear that in the future, you're like, you might be able to come back to the person and challenge them, whoever is saying that. But that is a very common, I've seen that in McKinsey reports, I've seen that all over, so it's a very common thing. But the better together, you heard what Mani said about how some of it is useful. And the trick is finding where it's useful. And that is our collective task. And my goal is not to be like, it's never useful. But my goal is also not to be like, it's always useful. And sometimes, particularly with the split between, better together, often I hear, oh, the machines will do the thinking and the humans will do the feeling. And, that's pretty interesting, especially for like someone who studies gender, because women's work has been more of the feeling kind. And even today, if you, the more feeling a job has in it, the more interpersonal kind of connection that it has in it, actually the lower it is paid, controlling for all sorts of characteristics, and that has had everything to do with women's lack of pay equity. So I'm kind of interested. Like I talked to a radiologist who was like, we need to become more patient-facing. And I was like, fascinating. And he's like, yeah, we need to not only explain x-rays to physicians, we need to actually get in and talk to the physician and talk to the patients themselves. I'm like, that's fascinating. Who owns patient time? The people who own patient time are primary care physicians. And the difference in pay between radiologists and primary care physicians is like 2 or 3x, something like that. And that is really interesting. That feels like that's going to adjust. If one of these is going to be mechanized And one of them, the relationship-based ones, are a little less likely to be mechanized. It feels like there's going to be some pay equity adjustment. So that's a kind of a digression. The point that I'm making is the separation between feeling and thinking has underlaid a lot of inequities. And the idea that machines will do the thinking and humans will do the feeling suggests kind of interesting things about how current gender inequities might be reconfigured. I'll leave you with one, or I'll end with one thing, though, that is a problem, is that you can't really separate feeling and thinking. Like those are actually deep, like the human work of feeling has thinking embedded within it. And a classic case was brought up, like last week I was in DC, and the person who was sitting in your chair was a lawyer who I knew from a long time ago. And she was the one who brought it up for me. She was like, mercy is feeling and thinking together. And if you just do the feeling, you don't have both. And I'm sure there are feeling and thinking combinations in doctor work. And so I don't want to just give the thinking to the machines. At the same time, I'm very open to how you find it helpful. But I just want us to be cautious.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, on that note, you also, in chapter 3, talk a lot about the automation frontier, right? Mm-hmm. And I dare say that while at some parts of my work, the computer, the electronic medical record is incredibly helpful, it hasn't freed me up at all.
Right.
In fact, that is a huge fallacy.
Right.
What has happened is, in place of it, I am now not only the doctor, but I also code.
Yes.
So I am gathering data for our friends who operate what I like to say on the dull end of the knife, the people that are doing the quality improvement. I am a wonderful source of data generation for them to ask big questions. How many people with status asthmaticus did Dr. Mokalla or the hospital team take care of this year? What were our resources? How can we make lymphocyte less? These are all great questions. But the person that's putting that data in is on the sharp end of the knife. It's going to be me in 2 hours taking care of that asthmatic at 1 o'clock in the morning. And somewhere in the back of my mind, when I'm coming up with the care plan, trying to see the family and let them know that their beloved is going to be okay, somewhere on my to-do list I have, make sure you update the problem list. It has nothing to do what I'm going to do for this family or this kid. It has everything to do with what the organization wants me to do in terms of maximizing my productivity, which your book does a great job of articulating. Like, look, this is all about, we want to make it reproducible, profitable, and something that's predictable. I think back to the chaplain in the beginning of the book. She has this profound interpersonal experience with this critically ill patient. And as I'm reading it, I'm nearly in tears, and then it switches to, and then she went and entered her interaction, not in 1, not in 2, in 3 different databases. And oh, by the way, her services are not billable. Well, who wants that data? Right. Who needs that data if it isn't for our capitalistic model? So I wondered if you could speak to us a little bit about this automation frontier, this frontier where the 6-year-old kid is in school and he just wants a little attention. What's 5 minus 3? And at the end of the semester, he and the professor are sitting down and they're both looking at their tablets to look at their progress. And again, by way of example, people like me that are doing many tasks above and beyond, again, the sharp end of the knife care. How did we get here, and how is it looking for us moving forward? Are we on an inevitable road, or can we pause?
Such a good question. The inevitability of the road. It's very hard. I'll just say a couple things, which is first, the notion that you are in charge of data. The person who's in charge of making the relationship is in charge of the data collection. That is actually true. That's true across, that's not just doctors. That's also teachers. That's also, that's the paradox, the terrible paradox of how we are organizing this work today, is we are putting data collection, we have this kind of fad of data collection that we are then imposing upon these relationship jobs, and it's kind of ruining them because we don't actually respect this work. And that's actually another, can I come up with another? That's another reason why I wrote this book, was to put a name on this kind of work so that people who are having to do both the data collection and the relationship can be like, you know, I do this other thing, and this is the thing that's powering the outcomes that we care about, and I'm not able to do it because you're making me to collect all this data and do all these other, you know, things like that. So, yeah. Is it inevitable? It depends how much you think we repeat history. And are we on this kind of historical path? I mean, I'm hoping that people can, I do think that there is a trajectory of kind of that other people have identified before me about how we kind of are imposing industrial logic, and we're imposing it on occupations of all kinds, and this is the final frontier of that, and it is happening even in these feeling, connecting jobs. So in that sense, it feels probably inevitable. I do feel like we're at a kind of critical disjuncture of how much people can tolerate its mechanization, and so that's why I'm a little more hopeful than just you know, assuming that it's all going to happen. I do think we can fight back, and one of the chapters that I wrote because my husband suggested it, and shout out to him because it's now one of my favorite ones, is organizations that are doing it right, that actually exist today. They're not, you know, just pie in the sky. They actually exist today, that, you know, kind of manage anyway to, you know, kind of give enough time, or to produce kind of peer support groups for the workers so they feel like they can process the experience, or they, you know, like I talk about the different factors that they do that make it possible. So kind of broadly, in a historical sense, there is a twinge of inevitability, but I am hopeful that this is a moment where people can go, no, that's actually too far, and by the way, here are all these exceptions to this inevitability.
I would welcome that. Among the joys in my life is the opportunity to teach with Dr. Martin. He's somewhere here. Oh, there he is. This gentleman is a professor at University of St. Thomas, and foolishly, he has accepted my help in teaching a class. And the class is based on healthcare and folks that are interested in going into medicine, and we have experts, and among the experts that come and visit us is one of my former bosses and mentors, Dr. Phil Keyboard. He was the chief medical officer at Children's, and he also had his MBA. He said something remarkably profound. He said, you know, Mani, every system is set up perfectly for the results it gets. We, in the United States, post-World War II, happened to choose that healthcare is a privilege and not a right, and that we are going to tie it to employer benefits. And we are where we are now because of the system that we have developed this ecology around, this ecosystem. And I have to tell you, when I was reading chapter 5, Dr. Ruthie, unbelievable. You know, because I feel like myself and probably every nurse, social worker, psychologist can identify with these challenges of, you go into it because of a mission. You go into it because you want to help and serve others. But then that burns you out because you don't have enough resources to back you up. You go into it at some point in your career in a corporate model where actually now we care about all of this extra data entry that you have to do. We have resources for you, but there's all this extra work. So the time that you're yearning for is no longer there, or it's very deprived. Or the third model, which again is for the privileged in medicine, is you hire me privately and sure, I'll spend all the time in the world with you, but I am self-selecting now who I'm choosing to serve. And I'm really curious, again, in that context of every system is set up for the results it gets. Is our country ready to have a seismic shift and say, wait, we're going to pause, and on this issue, I'm just going to talk healthcare because that's all I know. On this issue, we are going to say no, better than nothing is not a gift, it's actually an insult, and I'm going to demand that I want to see eye to eye with a cardiologist, an endocrine doctor, a chaplain, a social worker, psychologist. What are your thoughts?
You mean like on,
I mean, is it
are we
doable?
ready
Are
to
we
change
there?
it?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to defer to you. I don't actually know the answer to that question. That's kind of like, about this kind of the seismic shifts that need to happen in healthcare and all of the competing interests that want it the way it is. I don't know. I can't evaluate.
How about in other arenas? Let's go to the school system. I thought it was amazing to learn about. I have 150 kids. I'm going to totally welcome the computer to aid me in some stuff.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that being, we have no direct personal connection at all.
Yeah.
And is it important to teach a kid math? Is it also important maybe to teach her or him some coping skills and social skills and maybe camaraderie? And I just wonder if we're eroding that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think one of the points of the chapter that he's talking about, where I took this one person and we followed her through her career, and she actually experienced these three most common ways that we organize it, including, so it's actually a little bit of a tragedy in my view, because she starts so dedicated to providing, kind of care to the underserved in Appalachia. And she talks about how that was her motivation to go to medical school and everything. And she ends up in kind of direct primary care. It's not quite concierge medicine, but it's that kind of thing where you have a membership fee, and she's, worried that her people aren't really used to paying for it, and the whole question when I talk to other people like that is not just, are you, providing, the care they're giving is great. It's artisanal, their connective labor, but it's also kind of existentially deeply challenging because they don't know whether they are kind of servants. That's how they are fighting against their inside. Am I a servant? Because it's not providing to a lot of people, it's providing to rich people who can afford you. So it's a deeply problematic kind of organization of all these, and the question really is, is that kind of organization is actually also happening in education, like where you can think of, the strapped public, under-resourced, the kind of corporate, kind of independent school, or, the private tutoring. And actually the largest, the fastest growing occupations in America today are personal services to rich people. So personal trainer, personal chef, personal investment counselor, anything the word personal in front of it. And that is connective labor. They are doing this artisanal work, reflecting the enormous inequality of the people who can afford them. So that really matters, and I wanted you to know that, so that as you go. But I also want you to keep your eye not just on, like when we talk about AI. Here's another tool for you as you go out and face these engineers who are making these big claims, and you're like, I don't know whether I'm allowed to criticize this. Okay, here's a tool. There are three ways that people are currently talking critically about AI. One of them is job loss. One of them is bias. One of them is surveillance. We're not talking about the fourth thing. It's really important, and I cannot emphasize it enough. And that is the impact of AI on relationship, on what happens between people. And how we're organizing it matters, because actually when you degrade this work, like when you increasingly script it and compress it and make them put in, a lot of data and give them no time. And I talk to doctors who are like, my hand's on a doorknob. I know it's terrible. Everyone deserves to be seen, but I don't have time. There's a lot of kind of constraints on this work. And when you do it in that fashion, when you degrade it, then people start to go, well, it's already kind of bad, and it becomes a kind of slippery slope to its mechanization. And the example that I give of this slippery slope is actually grocery clerks, which you're like, grocery clerks, why? I do not have a relation, there's no connected labor there. Well, there used to be. In 1920 and before, grocery clerks were men, and you came and you gave your list to the man, and he was like, oh, last week you had your aunt, and what did she think about no? He knew your people, he knew what they wanted, he knew it was a reflective, connective moment of community. And then in 1920 was invented the contemporary store, where shoppers were like let loose in the store, and then they would just go to the front to check out. So then you have the invention of the cashier, and those jobs became female, and they became increasingly scripted. And so now they have like a carpal tunnel, and it's like, do you want paper or plastic, and do you want to donate to this, whatever, and it's not a relationship. Yeah. And so what do we have? What's the next step? Self-checkout. And people say they hate self-checkout, but 30% of transactions take place on self-checkout. So people hate it, but they use it. And that kind of, it's not like people go in and be like, you're a therapist, I'm just going to mechanize it now. That's not how it happens. It's actually a step where you have this kind of increasing degradation based on its organization and the imposition of this kind of industrial logic. And the end is automation. So now you are empowered to see it, and hopefully you will choose the human. Although sometimes I am in self-checkout also.
I wondered if I could just ask you a general question.
Sure.
Now that we dug deep into some of the heart of the matter.
Sure.
I just was curious, what surprised you as you were doing this research? Was there anything that hopefully pleasantly surprised you?
Ooh.
Including the chapter from your husband.
That was lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, it surprised me. Actually, there is a long list. So it's not that pleasant, though, I'm sorry. People say the economists are the gloomy profession or whatever. Really, sociology has it beat, I think. And there are a couple of sociologists here with me. Yeah, so the thing that surprised me was I had some people who did their work in a kind of mechanized environment. So I had a bunch of people who did not. That was actually how my sample ranged. And those who worked alongside machines, those who worked in an AI environment, what was surprising is what it did to their experience, their jobs, their life. Goodbye. Everyone say goodbye.
Sorry.
It's okay. Bye. Go to the airport. So the first thing is it erased their labor. So that's something we know that AI does. That even in non-feeling professions, when there's that army of data identifiers who are like, this is a bagel and not a dog, and that's a dog and not a bagel, right? We know that there's almost like kind of hidden human labor that is not. Well, that's also true in this feeling work. So I talked to this woman who was working as a coach in a diabetes app, and she was like, I'm not a therapist, and they know I'm not a therapist, and I'm not doing therapy, and there's nothing like therapy, but she was also she was burnt out after she went home every day. People would tell her really intense things. The clients would treat it like therapy, even though, anyway, so it's like there was an erasure of her work. The other thing is, she had to explain to people how she was not a robot. She had to prove to others that she was not a robot. And that is a wild existential experience where you're like, okay, how do I prove that I'm not a robot? She would kind of text people personal things, or kind of try and be casual, but just kind of proving this lack, or proving that you are not a robot was an existential challenge that was shared across people who worked alongside machines. So those were kind of surprises to me. for example?
I was just astonished that there was a program for somebody who's not a therapist to basically render therapy.
Yeah.
And how the
Yeah.
supervisors were like, oh, no, you're doing great. No, that's okay. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And she I think Veronica is the
Yeah.
character,
Mm-hmm.
very beautifully talks about her experience and how, again, yes, she had to send text to say, no, I really am a human.
Yeah, I'm a human, yeah.
And B, no, I remember what you said, and that's why I'm calling you back.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, like from a legal perspective, I found it fascinating that such systems can exist.
Yeah.
That you can actually get therapy from somebody who's not a therapist and not call it therapy, and yet the person who's rendering that care, that labor of love,
Yeah.
totally not being recognized for it.
Yeah.
Or even supported.
Right, right. I do feel like we should leave time for questions.
Oh yes, indeed.
So
Yes, thumbs up.
people can
Yeah.
great. People can ask anything, and you know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Allison, I very much enjoyed this discussion, and I was extremely surprised immediately in that I thought there was going to be, from its title, a view of almost the neo-Hegelian and I and the other,
Uh-huh.
and you went in a direction that I found surprising, because in fact there are many non-human others, and they're made out of meat, and they're
Yeah.
domestic animals
Right.
who have communicative abilities and have concupiscence with us. I wonder if you have any thoughts as to moving from your explanation of engineering that your husband and I were sadly part of at one point in our careers, into looking at this thousands of years interface between animals and people.
Yeah. Can you hear him in the back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good question. First time I've gotten that question in 5 of these. I haven't really thought about that, but I share your interest in it. Because, and I'm also kind of interested because part of this work is figuring out what is human. And that's actually, we talked about the automation frontier. That's what scientists have been, or scholars have been trying to do for like 100 years. You know, and they're always being like, well, machines can't do this. And then like the next 10 years, all of a sudden, machines are doing it. And that's why I called it an automation frontier, because it's like moving and contested and kind of constructed, you know, kind of every year a different thing. And now they're saying it's creativity. Well, I should say, they said that before ChatGPT. So now I don't actually know what those creativity people are saying. So I'm kind of in the job of finding out what is uniquely human, and I have decided not to point to anything coming out of an individual as uniquely human, except maybe emotions. But anyway, it's really the interaction that I'm most interested in. So what's uniquely human compared to machines is almost easier than what's uniquely human compared to animals. That, I would say, is probably another frontier as we find out that whales call each other names and have a language, and you know. So next book, or I don't know. Super interesting though. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Michael.
Well, just connected to that, introducing the non-human world, you know, the thought of a radical potential, which I think he was asking for early on, could be allow the market to just squeeze out care because it can't do care, and we know it, we feel it every single day, and figure out ways to take care and be part of social reproduction that's not part of the market. We do this all the time.
Yeah.
We walk out of the doctor's office or the classroom or whatever, and we're frustrated because care is not being exhibited. So we do it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, and I'm curious if your people have told you, and it sounded like they do, even though they're burnt out, is how they create care outside the market. And then the question is, how can we mobilize that sentiment so that the market is very limited in its capacity to control care, and that we as a society take over the responsibility of social reproduction and love and care and gratitude and everything else that we're, in a sense, we should be doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of a fundamental critique of the market. But instead of figuring out ways how we can squeeze back care into the marketplace, and I think historically, there have been a lot of movements that have done this. That is, a critique of the market is to replace the market with, farm to table, with sharing knowledge, wives' tales. I mean, there's a longer history to the marketplace than a capitalist endeavor, right? So, I mean, I'm just curious if you felt from your interview, folks, a sentiment that we can do this better without, the market. Or do we do it without even thinking that, in a sense, we're doing it in spite of the market?
Yeah. So I love that question. And I would say that people's imaginations are, I think, more limited than you're describing in terms of being able to see outside of the context in which they are currently working, but they do feel this kind of inchoate dissatisfaction, and so I think they would recognize what you're saying, the people I talk to. My own feeling is I agree that the market is, what the story that I'm telling is a story of kind of what the market is doing to this care. But I have a hard time saying let's just turn it off altogether over in anything. I kind of want more of it, not less of it. But I understand what you're saying. Like, if we shut it down over here, surely we would be opening it in these non-marketized environments. So I hear that, I'm listening, but personally, I want more of it everywhere. So that's the stumbling block for me. Yeah.
First of all, thank you. This has been really wonderful.
Oh, great.
I have kind of a two-parter, selfishly.
No problem.
The first part, I think, sort of builds off some of what you were just talking about. One of the things I really enjoyed in the book that, to me, felt like a really powerful rejoinder to this better than nothing argument is, you pointed out that, we have limited resources, and choosing to invest them in automation and, AI and technology means not investing them in communities, where we say, well, you can have this AI because you don't have anything, and actually we can choose to invest that resource there.
Right.
So I'm curious, that seems like a kind of massive redirect that we need to do, and how, any thoughts on how we do that?
Yes.
That's part one. And then the other part is, you were talking about the feeling, thinking separation.
Yeah.
And I recently read an affect studies book, which is a totally new thing for me. I don't know that much about, but they were arguing that actually thinking and feeling are sort of deeply entangled, and that you can't separate them, that thinking is feeling and feeling is thinking.
Right.
So I wonder if, like, one thing I worry about with this idea that we're gonna, have the human work be the feeling work and the AI work be the thinking, is that it like further calcifies this kind of separation.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on what we can do about that.
Yeah. Good, great questions. What was the question again? Tell me again, because I have something about that.
Where we invest our resources.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's really common and very and crucial. I would say when I was speaking to engineers, it's not like they were these nefarious devils who were like, you all, can just die. No. They were actually often motivated because they thought they were making the world a better place. That's something that they often would say. But that was a hard sell, especially in these socio-emotional ones, because they are often accused of taking the place of human interaction, or human jobs, or human dehumanizing our world. So what they would say is their answer to to the primary critique, which is that they were going to take our jobs, is universal basic income. So these libertarians, most of them not deeply progressive, were signing on. It's actually very common. Like, this is what many of them said. This is what they believe, that universal basic income is the solution to the eradication of work, or the turning of work into a luxury, essentially, which is what happens when you mechanize everything. And so that struck me as kind of interesting, because the right, or I don't know, right-ish, and the left kind of come together on universal basic income. Now, there's a lot of experiments going on internationally about those that are, kind of little pilot projects, and I don't know whether we would ever jump to that, but that felt to me like a radical change that was potentially potentially positive, although I was having trouble with the intermediary step, which, anyway, yeah. So in terms of will we realize as a collective that the better than nothing is a distraction from, or a suck, a way of making us okay with existing deep deprivation and inequality, especially for public subsidy? I mean, I don't know, but I hope so. I'll say that. That's definitely true, and I didn't hear that among the engineers that I talked to in California. And the second one was, what was that? Yeah.
Whether it's going to further entrench this notion that thinking and feeling are separate.
Are separate. Yes, that is better. Right. I do think it will. I do think it does. I mean, I talked to a lot of primary care physicians, for example, and one that was particularly articulate was like, physicians need decision support. They need, they need to hear about, the most likely medicine for this or that, or what's the dosage or whatever. They need that. But primary care is about motivating the other person. And that happens through seeing the other. And that's not mechanizable. So that sounds like a feeling and thinking distinction, but I don't want to overstate it, but it did feel like that was the path. And by the end of my research, I was starting to be like, well, if it is inevitable, that's at least the best version. But it wasn't a very positive story. So yeah, anyway. Thank you for your question. I think this is probably the last one, I'm guessing. Yeah. I think this is the last
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just on the UBI thing, I am a corporate writer, journalist for a large financial services company that experiments in AI. I read about AI because of that.
Okay.
As an organization, my employer engages an ethics organization around AI
Yeah.
in the university academic world.
Oh.
And I wonder with the UBI thing, if that's a way of sort of bringing ethics into this, we can ethically justify AI through a utopia that involves UBI. And
Right.
I wonder too if you just saw an ethical justification for this sort of technological advancement.
I mean, I agree, but I wouldn't even call it that. I would actually say what it is it's a way of not dealing with the ethical problems of AI. It's about well, this is a different thing I'm doing, and I'm not going to worry about its impact because we're going to have this massive social program that seems highly unlikely at this moment. So, it does seem a little fraudulent. No, sorry for that. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Mani, for your I really appreciate it.